Okay, did we watch the same show? I thought the finale was fantastic. It was almost perfect. My biggest complaint is that there wasn't more, that it wasn't a little bit longer at the end. So we could have gotten a little bit more of a wrap up, a little bit more of a complete wrap up. That part, with everyone going off on their own, doing their own thing, felt a little bit rushed. Otherwise, everything everyone's complaining about, I think, is actually bullshit. It's nonsense. And I'll prove it right here. I think I can actually prove it. This is not an action-focused show. And this idea that they should have increased its budget astronomically to make an MCU-style slugfest is also ridiculous. Those budgets, the type of money it takes to do something like that, to make the MCU shows, like on Disney Plus, is so much that they burned billions of dollars. They're trying to move away from that. They spent way too much money. It was never profitable. It was never worth it. Not a single show on Disney that they spent that kind of money on was worth it. So, expecting them to do the same is very ridiculous. Shows' budgets are getting out of hand. But besides all that, I don't think we've been watching the same show. Do you guys remember season 2? That was most people's probably favorite season. It's the one that gets the most praise. Universal praise, anyway. And what was the end fight of that like? Were people screaming about power scaling and power levels? And honestly, anyone talking about power levels and power scaling in The Boys is just being ridiculous. As soon as you say that, it just isn't the show for you. And that's fine. I'm not trying to say that you're a worse person or you're not, smart enough for it or whatever. But it's just not the show for you. There are other shows out there that'll give you that dopamine of, the constant action. Or, if that's what you want from a superhero show or a show with superheroes in it, then go watch that. But again, going back to season 2, that end fight in season 2, please go back and rewatch it. It was super simple, super basic. There was no crazy choreography. There was no crazy effects. It was really subdued. They're in a pretty random field, and if we want to talk about power scaling, she shocks all of them, the normal humans, and they just fly backwards and they're fine. They walk it off. Not a single broken bone, nothing. And you could easily say, if you're one of those power scalers, oh, why didn't they die? Back then, over here in the building and earlier in the season, all the people died. It was a big explosion, or the building got destroyed. Why didn't they die? It's because that's just not how writing works. Powers like that don't even exist, by the way, they're made up. The physics behind them don't make sense, so you can't make calculations based on real-world physics for things that don't make sense inherently. Power scaling is not real. It is not a real narrative tool. No writer uses it. No writer does that. None. No serious writer that's ever made anything that's been made. That's just a fact. And it's not any different than season 2 was. In fact, it's way better than season 2. It's way more of a dramatic fight. It's a way bigger fight than season 2 was. How did season 2 end? They just punch her, and then they just kick her. They just stomp her. And then she flies away. That's the fight. That's the big finale. The girls get it done scene. That was it. And no one complained. Why? Because the characters were great. The story was great. The themes were great. The messaging was great. The political commentary was great. That's what makes The Boys The Boys. That's what makes The Boys good. Not crazy, over-the-top, violent fights. It's never been like that. And you have people like Moist Critical and all these YouTubers jumping on the bandwagon, copy-pasting whatever they see on Twitter. Because people like Charlie from, Moist Critical doesn't have an opinion of his own. I'm sure he's a nice guy and everything, but I've never seen him have a unique opinion or an opinion that isn't straight from the Reddit or straight from the top pages on Reddit, on the whiniest subreddits. It is really obnoxious. No one is talking about the character. No one is talking about the story. No one is talking about the themes or the messaging or the politics. Nothing. It's just power scaling. Oh, he didn't jump fast enough. Oh, it didn't look like he flew fast enough. You know, it's all nonsense. And here's another big one. Why didn't Homelander fly away? He tried to fly away multiple times. But he also has an ego and literally thinks he's God. You know, and people are watching on live TV. And there's a point in that fight where he just says, screw it, and then he's going to kill all of them. Where he stops trying to run. He thinks he's this ultimate badass God. Right? If you cared about the actual characters and the humanity within those characters, you'd understand and accept that characters make mistakes. They don't always choose the most logical decision possible. Just like in real life. So it's so weird to go back with this, in hindsight, and look at all the choices characters could have made. None of the choices that were made were out of character. None of them. You know, so it's just wild to hear that the writing is terrible because of the way powers are portrayed. Because one person isn't strong enough, one person is too strong, or whatever. That's child stuff. That's kid stuff. Adults don't seriously argue about power levels. They don't seriously think that power scaling is a real narrative tool. That is just a fan fiction, fun, goofy thing to do on the side. That's how it used to be. It was just a joke, basically. It's just for fun. Messing around. Would Goku beat Superman? Blah, blah, blah. You know, but it's not a thing to hang the narrative on. Also, we have, like Charlie said in his video, he thinks that V1 didn't matter. That it's stupid because Homelander didn't go Super Saiyan after he took it. That it didn't do anything. Are people watching the same show? Again, that's just ridiculous. He wanted the V1 to be immortal. Something they've been setting up since the last season, where he was scared of his aging. The whole reason why he got his son, because he wanted to make a mini him, to be, like, his legacy. After he inevitably died. And an immortal Homelander is insanely dangerous, obviously. Because if he wasn't, you know, he'd grow old and eventually die, dictator or not. And then you have the fact about the virus. That's why he was in such a rush as soon as he heard about it. He could have died from the virus. If Homelander has the V1, the virus plan is off the table. So it did matter. It didn't need to make him go Super Saiyan and destroy a trillion buildings. You know, I get people wanted more, but you can always have more. Right? It doesn't make what's there bad. It was brilliantly written. It has fantastically acted. You know, and I don't see what people wanted other than, you know, an ending of a Man of Steel style slugfest at the end. And if that's what you're expecting, that's never been what the show is. Not now, not ever. What people are truly asking for, and I think this is an unarguable fact, they're asking for a different show. And what's crazy about it is so many of these power scaling arguments are also just wrong. Like people complaining about, you know, how strong or how they were able to hold down Homelander at all when they couldn't in season 3. Who says Ryan isn't stronger than Soldier Boy at this point? Who says? Because he got beat up by Homelander? You know, probably would have happened the same way with Soldier Boy if they would have fought 1v1. He was getting crushed by him without Butcher until Butcher woke up in season 3. You don't have to get choked out. So, like, I don't understand. And also, Butcher is way stronger than he was with Temp V. I think that's undeniable. That's obvious. They thought Newman might be unkillable, unbeatable, undamageable in Season 4. And he just easily dealt with her. So he's clearly insanely powerful. You know, and then Kimiko also got a big power-up. In durability, too. People are saying, oh, why didn't she get cut in half like she did at the beginning of the season? Another one of the big complaints. It's like, because she got a power-up? Because she got more durable? You know, she's shown extensively in Season 3 when they're experimenting on Soldier Boy. You know, Homelander's also trying to be quicker and just quickly laser her and move on. He's not lasering her in half in the same way before. He's got other people there to deal with who are a real threat and trying to kill him. You know, so it was a bigger, better lineup than Season 3. That's why they were able to hold him down and beat him. Homelander wasn't stronger in any significant way because of V1. That's never implied. That's never said anything. You know, you also have people complaining about advertising, about posters they saw. You know, expecting or thinking, because everyone's overanalyzing every piece of media they see before they come out for spoilers and whatnot. Every toy, everything. A poster is just a poster. Okay, it doesn't mean this is what's going to happen in the show or in the piece of media. It could just be a piece of art, a metaphor. You see Butcher and Homelander facing off with a burning city in the back. You could easily just say that's a metaphor for the possibility if they lose. Right? You know, people also complaining that there wasn't a big military fight. Well, here, I think they're trying to make a point. A point that people will just roll over. And if you look around you now, that's pretty true. That's pretty accurate. You know, they've always been very on the nose with their political commentary, and I think this is just another clear example of it. Remember Trump saying that he could shoot someone in the street and no one would care? No one would do anything? Which they did straight up in The Boys at the end of, pretty sure it was, at the end of Season 3, when he kills the protester. But it's a similar idea at a bigger scale. You know, everyone's too busy with their Netflix and their TikTok and everything else to actually get up and do anything. We're all much more comfortable than we used to be. You know, I wonder if we have it in us to fight back if something like that happens. And look at the military being deployed in all of our cities, patrolling all of our cities. Do they say no and lay down their arms and walk away? No, they killed innocent civilians. Multiple of them. Shot a bunch more, too. You know, but no one wants to have that discussion because all they think about is power levels. You know, power scaling, again, is not real. It is juvenile. Not only that, you get it wrong. You know, there's this big new trend that I've seen where everyone thinks they're smarter than the media that they consume. Always. And I think that's the problem of influencers. Of so many people out there, so many video essays, so many opinions, so many videos like mine here. That make everyone think that they're just as capable of making a show like that, of judging, of writing something like that they could do better. You know, these Hollywood types are all just morons who don't know how to write, don't know how to make anything. And I think that's really obnoxious, rude, and just ridiculous. I don't know how else to explain it. It's just ridiculous. It's insanely pretentious. You know, there's a reason we're not writers, that we're not making movies. And there's a reason why they are. You know, I think as the show got more and more popular, and as the show went on, it also upset more and more people. And not because of its quality, necessarily, at all. I had some issues with Season 4. I think Season 4 is definitely the worst season. But I think as the politics got more and more extreme in the real world, it was reflected in the show. And, more than 50% of the population, or 50% of voters at least, voted for Trump. So you're inevitably going to have a huge part of the country who's upset about the political commentary and looking for any excuse to crap on the show without admitting that they're angry about being made fun of in the show. There was that big thing early on in the show where Republicans didn't realize they were being made fun of. Where people didn't believe that Homelander was a literal Trump surrogate. He's supposed to be Trump. So, I don't know. I think influencers have truly started to definitively ruin media. Ruin people's ability to enjoy it. So, I don't know. My last thought here is just try to enjoy things for what they are. Stop creating these giant expectations in your head before you see or play the thing or whatever. It goes for video games or movies or TV shows or books or whatever piece of media or art that you're consuming. Go into it understanding this is someone else's vision, not yours. And if you're an adult, stop with the power scaling. I see with Invincible too, it's not real. It's never valid to complain about it. The only time it really makes sense is if, Batman with no special gear or no special anything, just, punch Superman's head off. Of course that's ridiculous. But this is not what we're talking about here. Does anyone even remember a time that people liked a series finale? When the last time was? Because I don't. Breaking Bad? And I don't think that's because all this writing has gotten so much worse, just across the board. I think people have gotten bitter and angry, and there's always this hate cycle that inevitably happens to popular media. And influencers and, everyone else just eat it up and use it as an opportunity to make a quick buck. And I think that's slimy to do to people's work, to people's art. Clearly, these people really cared about the show and put a lot of effort into it. And to get so much hate because of power scaling is unbelievable. It's wild. But okay, I've ranted for far too long. I know no one's going to agree with me. I know I'm going to get a lot of hate, but I don't care. I'm really tired of the way people treat people's work. They don't treat it like it's even supposed to be enjoyable anymore. All right, have a good one.